The discussion of this session will center on the rapid and remarkable expansion of artificial intelligence, the profound repercussions of AI on employment within the financial sector, and essential proficiencies required in a financial realm driven by AI and the optimal approaches to ready organizations for this transformative AI era. Quite an interesting topic, and on this groundbreaking topic, this growing phenomenon can be explained in depth through our next topic in discussion, which is building skills for an AI world in finance. And our esteemed speaker for this discussion is Huy Nguyen Trieu, co-founder, Center for Finance, Technology and Entrepreneurship. And by the end of this session, we would be taking some questions. So without wasting any further time, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Huy Nguyen Trieu with a huge round of applause.
Yeah, we can start now right away and we'll wait for the PPT. So first, hello and welcome. It's a big pleasure to be with you. It's my second day ever in India and Mumbai, so very happy to be with all of you. And we'll be talking about these topics, which is artificial intelligence and skills. And you might have questions, you might wonder about what are the skills that we need in an AI world. Since a year ago, with ChatGPT, generative AI, we're seeing AI starting to do quite interesting things. So you might be wondering for yourself, what is it that I need to learn to be part of this world? Also, perhaps for your children, also, what do they have to learn in this world where things are progressing so quickly and machines can start to do things which are almost at our level. So we'll talk about it, and I'll share with you 3 frameworks to understand how we can think about AI and skills. It's not an easy topic at all. It's not an easy topic. A few years ago, in France, Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple at that time, was saying, he was giving advice to the French students, and he said, as French students, you're better off learning how to code than learning French. Is it that clear today? It's not obvious at all, and in the last few years, things have changed a lot. We'll try to make this a super interactive discussion. I don't want to make a very boring lecture for the next hour. So we'll try to make it a very interactive discussion. And before we start, because those events, they're huge events, one of the objectives for you is to learn, but another objective is also to get to know other people. So let's start right away, and what I'll do, I'll give you 3 minutes, and why don't you speak to your neighbor, introduce yourself, and say why you're here today, and in 3 minutes we can start. Hopefully the PowerPoint will be okay. So just say hi to your neighbors, and we'll start in 3 minutes. Okay, that was a perfect timing. I hope you had the time to enjoy to meet your neighbors. So let me start right away on this topic, and I'll just need the clicker. Thanks a lot. First, quick introduction. So I'm Huy, co-founder of CFT, Center for Finance, Technology and Entrepreneurship. CFT is 5 years old. We're based in London and Singapore. I spend most of my time between London, Singapore and Abu Dhabi. Before that, I used to be in banking. So for quite a while at Citi, I used to run a group at Citi, ABS, a few other banks. That was my day job. I also had a night job in fintech. And for my night job, I was an educator. So I was the first fintech resident expert at Oxford, where I co-created the Oxford Fintech course. Some of you might have taken it. And also founding partner of Supercharger, that was the largest fintech accelerator in Asia, out of Hong Kong. On the AI side, 5 years ago, I was program director of a program which was called Artificial Intelligence in Finance. So I spent a bit of time in the space 5 years ago already, and looking at the impact of artificial intelligence on financial services. At that time, our motto or our thoughts were quite clear. It was that AI is the single most important technology impacting financial services, impacting the world, which is what has happened. Just as an anecdote, I wasn't born as a banker. I started as an entrepreneur, actually, in the US, long time ago. I was CEO of UKB, and UKB was LinkedIn, but 5 years before LinkedIn. So very wrong timing. So when we'll talk about this, keep thinking about the timing and what's happening now. because timing is important. CFT, in a few words, an education platform, and it started from when I was at Oxford, which was great, but not everybody can afford Oxford. So the objective of CFT is education at scale, making sure that everybody, wherever they live, could have access to very good knowledge from industry experts around the world. We do it in a lot of different ways. We have a lot of large online courses from all the topics from finance to technology, AI, open banking, digital payments, blockchain. We build academies also. For example, we train the whole financial sector in Egypt, the government in Abu Dhabi, etc. And a lot of other things. But what we're really interested in this session is really around research and thinking. And so research and thinking, we'll try to think of this very difficult topic, which is what are the skills? And so I'll talk directly about AI and what has happened in AI over the last few years. First, when was the word AI, artificial intelligence, created? Anybody has an idea? Artificial intelligence? So artificial intelligence is old, actually. It was created more than 50 years ago. I think it was 1954. That was at the time when people were starting to think of machines doing the same thing as people. So just to define, so that we talk about the same thing, here we'll talk about three main terms: artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning. So artificial intelligence is this area of computer science, where basically machines try to do the same thing as humans. That's artificial intelligence. It's really broad. As part of it, you'd have a subsector which is called machine learning. Machine learning is when machines start to learn. A very simple example is, for example, a spam system. As you receive more and more spams, you categorize this email as a spam. The machine would learn that similar emails would be spams. And what is of most interest for our discussion today is deep learning. Deep learning is when we try to mimic the human brains. And that's a bit magical, because we don't really know how the brain works, but this is what artificial is starting to do today, which is mimicking the human brain and neural network. So if you look at this, this calendar of what has happened for a while, we've had machine learning for a long time. Even when I started in finance a long time ago, on the algo trading side, we're using machine learning. So machine learning has been going around for a long time. You can see the acceleration. The acceleration was around 10 years ago, a bit more, and that's around deep learning. And what is deep learning? That's about all the things that you can do now on your phone, which is more or less the same things that we humans can do. You remember that a long time ago, getting a phone or anything to recognize words was really hard. When you were calling a call center, you had to repeat like 25 times and it still didn't understand. Now it's almost at the same level as people. Now translation is at the same level as people. Computer vision is at the same level as people. We're starting to have self-driving cars. We're starting to have all of this. This is deep learning. And so here is a focus on deep learning. I just put some of these examples of what it can do. But what you can be certain is that it's happening much faster than we think. And in terms of capabilities, almost all the capabilities that we have as people are slowly, or very quickly actually, not slowly, are very quickly being done by machines. So this is about deep learning. If you had to remember one thing about why deep learning has increased so much in the last 10 years, that's the Google cat experiment. Do you know the Google cat experiment? Yeah, that's a really interesting experiment, which was that for some reasons, that we humans love cats, and we love to put pictures of cats on the internet. And so in 2013, Google basically just took a lot of videos from YouTube, just fed that into a machine, and what the machine found was that it started to categorize all those random things, and so this group of things, which were very, very similar, which were cats. Amazing, because in computer science, for a long time, we said there are things that machines can do really well, like calculations, but things that they cannot do as well as a child, for example, which is recognizing elephant and cats and all these kind of things. Suddenly, we had computers recognizing cats without telling them what they were. First thing. A year later, Andrew Ng, so from Stanford and Google, did the same experiment, but 50 times cheaper. How did he do it? He did it without using CPUs, but GPUs. Everybody's talking about GPUs at the moment. This is how he did it. And so the impact of this is that from a technology standpoint, we managed to get computers starting to do things the same way as our brain, but secondly, very affordable. And that's why research and development and applications have exploded over the last 10 years. So that's the starting point. And so remember those 3 important milestones. I talked about timing before, and why are we talking about this timing today? Which is that 2013 was when we were ready for exponential growth. That was in terms of the models, technology, data. Of course, with the internet, we have data everywhere. That's when research started to be much, much more affordable. 2018, that's when we started to develop our program on artificial intelligence in finance. We started to have machine learning, so not deep learning, machine learning being used in institutions, typically large banks, insurance companies. That's what I call the operationalization of machine learning. For example, credit scoring. For example, fraud detection. Some basic customer service. That was 2018, and that helped to put the infrastructure in place. And then last year, what did we have? We had ChatGPT putting deep learning in the hands of consumers, people like you and me. Things which are magical, which is affordable, and that allows for super fast innovation. This is the reason why we're talking about this today and about the skills, and not, for example, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, because now we're starting to have technologies which are doing magical things, almost like us, people, and there's a question of, what do we do? What do we have to learn? How do we adapt to this world? You might have seen this, which was from a research of OpenAI, of ChatGPT, where they basically took ChatGPT and basically they just got ChatGPT to take a lot of exams. And I know in India you love exams, also. So those I know all those exams for undergrads and grads. What's the bad news? The bad news, at least for exams, is that computers outperform humans by a lot. By a lot in the sense of they're always in the top 10% of the humans for any kind of exams across pretty much any kind of subjects. So this is almost a given now. It has happened in just the last year. So that's the starting point. And so what is the impact on jobs and skills? First, perhaps I'll stop here. Any questions before I jump into this? Anything you would really want to know? No, so I'll continue. So I'll use 3 different types of frameworks, 3 different types of approaches for you to think. And today it's really not, I'm not going to tell you, this is the future, this is what you have to do. I have no idea, so I can't tell you. What I can give you is some different ways of thinking about it, because at the end of the day, it's going to be for you. For me, it's going to be different, from all of you. So it's going to be for you to think about what is really useful and how you can apply it. How you can apply it to you, to your children, for example, to your organization. That's also, a very big thing. So this is really the objective. So the first thing that we did is to use a task automation framework. So when you think of task, actually, you need to think of, first, what are those tasks and why do we use it? So let's take a step back. For most of us, we have a job. And when we have a job, first we need some kind of job descriptions. You might be, I don't know, data scientist, data analyst, or a copywriter, or a digital marketing officer. So you have all types of jobs. In the case of fintech, last year we created what we call the Fintech Job Report. You can find it online, where we analyzed 20,000 jobs. And from those 20,000 jobs, we split them into different job families. So you see, you have some families which are more on the technology side, for example, engineering or product management. Some families which are more, for example, on the marketing side or risk and compliance, etc. So you'd have different types of jobs. Job families become job roles. And then, you'd have hundreds of job roles in financial services. So if you work in finance, then you might find your job roles, for example, on this huge skills framework from IBF, Institute of Banking and Finance in Singapore, that listed all the job roles in traditional finance. We did the same for fintech. So that's a starting point. That's your job. You have a certain job role. From this job role, then you do a list of tasks. So, for example, here it would be, I don't know, for example, on the engineering side, you'd have all those different types of tasks. So you try to break them down into tasks which are as granular as possible. Of course, it's much more than that. A job is much more than just a list of tasks. There's also this coordination between those tasks, making sure that they all flow together. But fundamentally, what you can do is try to list all your tasks as part of your job role. What can we see is that actually we can start thinking of those tasks in terms of AI. We didn't invent it. Actually, some much smarter people than us now have done it. And that's people who are working on self-driving cars. Because when you work on self-driving cars, you need to start thinking of actually those tasks and what kind of task can be done by whom. Are the tasks being done by humans or are the tasks being done by machines? And what they've done is that they have basically created 6 different stages of automation. From stage 0, which is no automation, you do everything yourself. So as a human, I took an example, for example, which is customer service, 0 automation. Basically, you go and talk directly to a customer service representative, nothing else. Up to level 5, where you'd have full AI autonomy, which is in the case of customer service, for example, all your customer service activities are fully effective by AI. It doesn't matter what it is, from very simple to very complex to exceptions, everything is done by AI. How do you achieve? So it depends on what, actually. So I'll show you an example. It depends on what. And that's a good question, actually. That's a good question, because when you look at this, it has to be at the level of task and at the level of group of tasks. So here it's much more at the level of task, and then suddenly it becomes much more comprehensive. Yeah. So you're starting to have those kind of things. I'll give you an example in 2 seconds. So I show you here what OpenAI did. So I don't know if you know, but OpenAI does a lot of research also. So they do really interesting research. They have started to do it by sector. So they looked at a lot of sectors, and across all those sectors, they listed a lot of different types of jobs. They broke them down in a lot of different types of tasks, and they looked at whether those tasks could be done much faster or not by an AI. And at the top are the types of sectors which are much more impacted, in the sense of AI would replace much more of those. And at the bottom are those which are much less impacted. To give you an idea of what is much less impacted, that tends to be very manual jobs. Farming, for example, would have much less impact from AI. Much more impacted, okay, that's not great, or at least for us in the room, because the financial services tends to be at the top. Why? Because financial services tends to be not very manual and tends to be very cognitive task. So that you can find it. So that's one approach. But I'll take another approach, which is, for example, if we're in banking, if you take an IB analyst, an investment banker analyst, then what you can do is that you can start to break down basically what are the tasks of an analyst. then an analyst would go from presenting to a client, but of course you'd have the part which is more on the research side, legal, collecting data, scenario analysis, etc., etc. So you can start to break down all this kind of approach and see what was the analyst doing before ChatGPT, what is the analyst doing today, and you can start to see if we're starting to move closer to the 5 or not. So something which is quite clear is that it's going from 0 to 5. So it's as AI is getting more and more sophisticated, we're moving more towards that level. Now there are some things which are, for example, presenting to clients. Yeah, presenting to clients is likely to be quite manual. But at the same time, for example, data analysis, data visualization, all those kind of things are starting to be more and more automated. So you could do the same for a lot of different tasks. So that's one approach for you if you had to think of your job of what is it that you really do. And I know that's not obvious because on a daily basis we don't think about it, but what is it that you really do across all your different tasks? What can you do much faster, much more efficiently with a machine? And what is it that you cannot do with machines, but which is your real strength or your real asset? And so this is what I call, and that's someone, one of the head of IBM, who told us a long time ago, 5 years ago, he was talking about augmented intelligence. He said, as a person, what you really need to think about is, it's not just artificial intelligence, it's for you. It's how to augment your own intelligence, how to augment basically your skills. And how do you do it? First, you need to have some kind of domain expertise. You need to know something. You have to start from somewhere. But once you have this kind of domain expertise, then make sure that you leverage on the AI. You have to be AI ready. You can't really be in the world anymore where you just do your stuff and hope that technologies will be something which is separate. That's not the case. And so that's the first skills, I would say, which is important, which is take a bit of time, think of what is it. So the question was, can you develop this domain expertise, and you give it, all of it to AI, and after that, there's no more people. What we see at the moment, by talking to a lot of senior leaders in organizations, that's the hardest part, which is people who are familiar with both. You tend to have people who are either on the technology side, or either people who are domain experts. People who have a mix are very, very sought after. So in terms of opportunities today, it's just a huge opportunity of being fluent both with your domain, but also being fluent with technology. So that's one way, that's the first framework. Sorry. Let me just look at the time to make sure we have time. Any other questions on this part? Yeah, go ahead.
Just one question. On the one hand, you have that famous Yuval Noah Harari, who talks about artificial intelligence, and he says with high computing power and with AI, you can always predict the way people behave, and anyone who's in power can actually influence the machines the way they want them to be. When you have AI, and he says democracy loses its meaning, free will loses its meaning.
So that would be a topic for a much broader topic. I would agree, in general, and that's more about the risk of AI, which we definitely need to think about, but it's clearly something which is happening. Just to give you an anecdote, when ChatGPT was launched last year, a few days later, I sent a message to our experts, because we have a lot of AI experts, getting their views on ChatGPT. And they asked me, and what do you think? And my first reaction is, I'm very afraid. So that was my first reaction. But that's not the topic for today, so we can talk about it later. Yeah, go ahead.
So, given that there are three broad categories where one can develop their skill set, right? If we gave you a choice, which among the three would you be focusing on?
What do you mean the three?
Let's just say was a domain expertise versus leveraging, having these skill set of leveraging or knowing how to leverage AI are completely two different things, right? So between that, what would be your choice?
I think you have to do everything. My view is that you have to do everything. You need to have a certain domain expertise, whatever it is, whether it's financial services or biology or whatever it is. But at the same time, you can't really just have this domain expertise without understanding technology today. I think it's just impossible, and that's how you augment, your own intelligence. Yeah, no, go ahead.
So you talked about financial industry where AI will have larger impact. What domain experts can do to be AI ready? What skills or what do you think make them AI ready?
So that's a very good question. I'll talk about it in a few slides. Thanks.
How do we as workers work around black box algorithms or black box? How do we work around that? Because we can't infer for that. We see the outcomes. So for we can't really see how they come to those outcomes. In that regard, if the function of the black box is, how do we work?
Yeah, so that's a really good question about black box, because sometimes AI is really magical. You don't really understand how it works. The beauty of it is that you're in financial services. And in financial services, you're unlikely to have a lot of black boxes because of regulation, because of the fact that regulators will be behind and will want to understand basically how those models work. Reality is that in other domains, social media, etc., you're not going to have the same kind of safety or guarantee. Okay, let's jump to the next framework, which is really different, really, really different. And because we're in a fintech conference, we'll talk about innovation framework. So innovation framework would know about unbundling of financial services. Unbundling of financial services is this innovation framework where, for example, on a bank that offers a lot of different services and products, you've had hundreds, thousands of fintech startups offering the same, but on some very, very narrow verticals with a very simple proposition, which is better, cheaper, faster. Better, cheaper, faster than the existing products on some very narrow verticals. So, for example, it could be on payments, or it could be on lending, it could be on borrowing, investment, etc., etc. So we've had that, these first kind of slides, we saw them for the first time 6 or 7 years ago when we were talking about all the advent of fintech startups and the way that they were innovating. So how does the unbundling process work? You normally start from an incumbent, a bank. The bank offers a lot of different types of products to end clients who could be retail users, people like you and me, or SMEs, etc. So that's the unbundling process. And then in between, what you have is those unbundlers, those disruptors, those fintech startups, those hundreds of new entrants. And what do? Is that for each single product, they would offer the same, cheaper, better, faster. So we've seen that pretty much around the world. It's very, very well known. It's not just in finance. In pretty much anything from the internet to Web3, etc. We've seen that. For example, in the internet. Actually, in the internet, what do you think is what was the first company which was the real unbundler that used the unbundling strategy? So that would be Amazon, actually. Amazon, very simple model of unbundling, which is I take a service, very narrow service, books, and what do? Cheaper, better, faster. I use technology, and that's how I get to take market share. What happens after a while in terms of unbundling is that at some point you're going to rebundle, of course. You're not just going to stay on the unbundling side. So cheaper, better, faster. Increased competition for the incumbent. Margin compression, so lower prices. Great for the users, not that great for the incumbent. And rebundling. So that, very, very well known. There's a lot of literature around it. We understand how it works in innovation in general. What I would argue, and you might not agree with it, is that we're starting to see that also in the AI space for human jobs. Why? And who's the incumbent? The incumbent is us, actually. It's us, myself, as a white-collar employee. I'm the incumbent. What I would do is that as an incumbent, I do a lot of tasks for a client. Who's my client? That could be my employer, so a large organization, or it could be an entrepreneur, it could be a consulting company, whatever it is. And what's the unbundling process? The unbundling process is that suddenly the client is starting to have some choices. Before that, the client had the choice of working with me. Now the client has the choice of starting to work with a lot of AI technologies. To make it a bit more concrete for you, I'll give you an example at CFT, which is a year ago, we were looking for a graphic designer at CFT. We couldn't find a graphic designer because, again, talking about domain expertise, etc., there were some very good graphic designers, but it was really hard to find graphic designers who really understood our world of finance, fintech, technology, etc. Now we're not looking for a graphic designer anymore. Why? Because our marketing team uses tools like DALL-E, which allows to create graphic designs really well, much faster than using a graphic designer, because they can express themselves directly into creating a design. And so this is what I was talking about, domain expertise and technology. This is what's happening to our marketing team, which is now they have a domain expertise on the marketing side. They're using technology. But in between, that means that someone has been unbundled, and that's a graphic designer. So that's one example of what is happening. If you put yourselves in the shoes of the clients, in the same way as we had unbundling in financial services, what is the rationale? Rationale is very simple. Is can I get the same service offered by someone else, but better, cheaper, faster? And this is what we're starting to see today, is that, for example, IBM saying that they won't hire, I know how many, thousands of people because they will be using more AI. Or in London, you're starting to have, forget the names of those coffees. They just opened new coffees in London where you have no more people, no baristas, because it's being done by machines, for example. This is typically unbundling. What do you do in an unbundling world? Because we are the incumbent in an unbundling world, in the same way as a bank was an incumbent. So first, you need to understand, what are all those different things which are being unbundled. And here you see that it's a lot. It's a lot. If you just go on the internet and look for AI tools, now you have whole directories of thousands and thousands of AI tools that can do pretty much everything, from translation to data analysis to creating logos to etc. etc. So very, very similar to what we do in terms of the task. So this is happening. But so what do we do? In the same way as when you're being unbundled as a bank, you need to think of what are your assets. For example, for a bank, what is an asset? An asset for a bank would be customer base. Trust, for example, would be an asset for a bank. So what are your assets as a person? What is it that really differentiates yourself from others? What are you really good at? So I think that's about leveraging your assets and really thinking very hard about what are your assets, and not just things which are standard for everyone. So which is basically your skills. And after that, again, you have to use AI. It's almost impossible today not to use AI, in the same way as it was impossible 20 years ago not to use start to use the internet or Excel or etc. Is to be AI ready. So here it's slightly different. It's much more thinking about your skills. What are your skills? Again, not easy. If you asked me a few years ago, what are your skills? I never thought about skills. You just do your job. You don't really think about your skills. Best way to think about what are your skills, I'll show you in 2 minutes. Any questions on this part? Yeah, exactly. 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 I fully agree with you. We're not talking about something which is static. This discussion a year ago, we wouldn't have had this discussion anyway. So it's moving very, very quickly. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
See certain skills in humans which perhaps cannot be automated. Like for instance, painting. Or even like Gen AI, even that can be replicated. So there are no skills that you know. What is your opinion?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. We'll see it in 2 seconds. Farming, perhaps. I don't know. It depends, if you're good at it or not. Good. Any other questions? Okay, so let's look at the third one. And so here we're going to use a skills framework. So if you're like me, until not very long ago, I never heard about a skills framework. The skills framework is quite useful, actually. And our skills framework, again, that was when we did the analysis of the fintech job report, 20,000 jobs, found a lot of skills. The title of the report was actually Tech is Eating Finance. Why? Because what we found is that a lot of jobs in fintech were closer to jobs of tech companies rather than financial services. When we said that, a lot of people said, so if tech is eating finance, I need to learn data science, for example. And we said, no, actually, that's not what we found. That's not what the research found. It's not just about hard skills. Because when we think about tech, we think a lot about hard skills. And so that's why we created SHIME, those 5 types of skills which we think are important. So let me ask you the question, what do you think is the S in SHIME? Soft skills. Very good. So soft skills would be the first one. H is hard skills. Mission, machine learning, no? We're still talking about humans. So actually, it's the most important. Man. No. You're close. Mindset. Mindset. And then finally, E is for experience. So that starts to answer your question, which is, what are some of those skills? First, we need to be very careful not to think just about hard skills. Hard skills are very easy to think of because hard skills are very easy to assess. So, for example, are you a good programmer? Take a test and we'll see if you're a good or bad programmer. Very easy to assess. That's the reason why, for example, when you hire people, usually you like to assess on hard skills. But then, actually, soft skills, industry knowledge, mindset, experience, when we interviewed people, we interviewed senior leaders, usually they never put hard skills first. In a lot of cases, they would put either soft skills or mindset first, for example. And so across all of this, we have dozens and dozens of categories of what should be important. So what I'll do is that I'll test it on you, so you can tell me what you think is important. So if you just do this, sorry, I'm saying test, it's a wrong word. It's not a test, so don't worry. It's more about you putting basically what you think is important, and so after that we can talk about it. So in just 5 minutes, it's going to force you to think a bit about what do you think are the skills which are important for you. So do it for yourself. Don't do it in general. Do it for yourself. What do you think is important for a role like the one that you have? So you can connect with GeoNext. The Wi-Fi is free and everybody can connect. Yeah.
Technical question if you want to start. So AI goes through a process called supervisory learning, right? So one of my theses is revolved around using Askimo's laws of robotics to sort of give it certain nudges in the right direction. Do you think is that possible? Do you think there's certain problems with that? How would that work?
Yeah, so this would be a question we can take later in terms of supervised learning and robotics. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll give you 2 more minutes and then we'll go, right away and discuss about it. If you can't do it, just save the link and you can do it later. Okay, so let's start. The first part is soft skills. So you should have put, what you think are the most important soft skills. Anybody has very strong views on what is the most important soft skill? Cross-functional collaboration. Communication. Empathy. Empathy. Okay, so you're all different, which is great at the end of the day. I show you, and it's going to change, but here, just to give you an idea of the profile of the people, they're senior leaders in the sense of their CXOs, they run either large organizations, smaller organizations, startups, etc. You mentioned cross-functional collaboration, so definitely that's one. And here's the top five. Top five, you might agree or not, but in general, I think so communication. So that was a really good point, because we're a bit surprised also. Normally, when you ask some people in terms of what are really, really important soft skills, there are two that usually come back, which is communication, collaboration. And here, for example, communication, wasn't a part of this. But again, that will depend on people. What is the objective of this? Is really just to think in terms of either for yourself or you're hiring people. What kind of soft skills do you want them to have? But also, most difficult question: how do you assess this? So you want to hire someone, in your team. How do you know if they are good at problem solving? So, for example, are you good at problem solving? No, so that's really hard. We spent a lot of time thinking about it, because on a one-to-one basis, you can more or less do it. If you spend time with someone, you get a coach, for example, you might have an idea, although it's always hard. But how do you do it for 1,000 people, 10,000 people? If you ask declarative questions, you will get the answer that you want to get. So one of the easiest ways that we found is ask their friends, actually. You ask their friends, their colleagues, their boss, and you don't ask them, are they good at problem solving or not? You'd ask them a whole list on top 10, and rank, which ones people are the most comfortable with, etc. That's still, one of the easiest way, which is basically references, in the old world, but getting others to give their opinion on you, because you as a person, you're always really bad at judging yourself. So soft skills. Hard skills, I'm not going to ask you which ones you think are the most important, because hard skills are very, very job dependent. So if you're a copywriter, I can't ask for the same hard skills as a data scientist. No, that's not the same at all. So hard skills, here is just in general. There's one, however, which I would fully agree with, which I think now is really important pretty much everywhere, which is project management. If you do a lot of project management, or even if you don't, you would know how difficult it is. And actually, it's a real hard skill, especially now that there's a lot of tools actually for project management. For example, at CFT, that's one of the most important hard skills, which is being able to manage projects. So project management, I think, is one. Business development or sales, a lot of people put that in hard skills also. That was interesting, which I think is definitely true. There's some basis to it. But again, we're not going to insist too much on this, because it's very, very job dependent. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, and that's also the bias that we have on the audience, which is the audience here is very senior. So the audience that we interviewed for this is very senior. So I agree with you. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Industry knowledge. So industry knowledge. So artificial intelligence. We didn't lead, that question into saying, you have to put artificial intelligence, but of course, everybody's talking about it now, so that's quite clear. We're seeing it across the whole sector. Artificial intelligence is something which people have to be fluent with. But there was more than that, also, and typically one that came back super often. Again, that was a surprise, for us, including traditional finance, was APIs. So if you don't know about APIs, whatever you do, I think it's interesting to learn about it because it's seen now as a prerequisite for a lot of things that you do. The next one will, in my opinion, is perhaps the most important. And that's the mindset. You were asking the question about what really differentiates us from a machine. Hard skills, now starting to be hard because hard skills are the kind of things which machines learn super, super quickly. Soft skills, much harder for a machine to have, for example, empathy. But mindset, at the moment, we don't have computers which are at that level of mindset. What kind of mindset? I think taking ownership, getting things done, usually at that level of seniority, that's the first one that comes back. After that, you'd have all the other ones. If there was one way to summarize it, is thinking like an entrepreneur. So when we started CFT, there was the question of, a lot of people asked us the question of what do you think are really the most important skills? And so far, we've always summarized it as think like an entrepreneur. Doesn't mean that you have to be an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter at all. You can be in large organization, small organization. But what is the constant for an entrepreneur is that an entrepreneur doesn't know what tomorrow will be. And because they don't know what tomorrow will be, they always have to adapt. And going back to your point, which is that things are changing all the time, I think that's really the constant, which is things are changing all the time. So think like an entrepreneur. If you're an entrepreneur, that's easy, you know what it means. If you're not an entrepreneur, I would suggest try to be closer to what an entrepreneur thinks, because that will open your eyes. I used to be in banking for a long, long time. I've had friends who've been in banking for 20, 30 years in large organizations. And that's really alien. Thinking like an entrepreneur is really different when you've been in a large organization. So how can you think like an entrepreneur? Try things, talk. For example, if you're more senior, you can mentor entrepreneurs, for example, that will allow you to understand how they think. You can launch some small projects. But I think that thinking like an entrepreneur is perhaps one of the most important skills. And finally, experience. Experience, because here it was a question for people who work in financial services, so that was quite obvious, was either experience in financial services or tech companies, actually. What is interesting is that we see the bias towards financial services and tech companies. So that finishes this part. Any questions? Any questions on a skills framework and what would be important? I can't tell you yet, because we really started this last year. So in terms of trends and what's happening, I can't really tell you yet. What I think, however, without being as structured, what we've seen over the last 5 years is that there's a constant when we talk to senior leaders, which is the most challenging skills that they see is really mindset. It's not hard skills. A lot of people would say, hard skills, you can learn, but it's really the way you think, the way that you take ownership, adapt, and that's why, even very large organizations, try, to change that's going, the culture of their organization. So I think if there was something to really think of, which is the hardest by far, is the mindset. So AI is eating everything. AI is definitely eating everything. Now I'll just take a step back because I think it's important. This topic can be very anxiety-inducing. In the sense of a lot of people would be talking about AI is eating my jobs, I'll be homeless, jobless, etc. This is clearly not the case today. This is clearly not the case today. It's like at the beginning of the internet, it's one of the biggest opportunities for those who have the right skills. So for you, basically, who, for example, are coming from the technology side or have domain expertise, that's one of the best opportunities to be part of this change. Because organizations are looking for skills, are looking for people who have this hybrid knowledge of the domain and technology. So make sure that you're part of it. Don't fall behind, because that's just one of the most amazing opportunities today. Yeah. Yeah.
Jobs that AI is eating. Like example, you said the designing field, the designing part. Now we do not need much of humans when AI is in play. So what about those jobs?
Yeah, so what about those jobs? There was an article, which I can send to you, that was really interesting, that was saying, for example, logo designs. Logo designs, very, very long time ago, it cost, I know, thousands of pounds, to create a logo, and, a few days or a few weeks. After that, you had, the trend of, for example, freelancers, on Fiverr, and then suddenly, you could create a logo for, £5, £10, etc. So what happened to all those people who did logos? They had basically to upskill and change their jobs. So instead of creating the logos, what they had to do is being able to work directly and understand the requirements of the marketing team, for example, and being able to translate that into logos, and someone else was doing the logos. So they were not doing the execution side anymore, but they had to upskill and basically think more at a more comprehensive level. Yeah.
As an undergraduate student, perhaps, what advice would you give the AI ready? Because our curriculum doesn't really take into account the things that's happening with AI. So how do I, as a student, sort of be AI ready?
Yeah, so as a student, that's a really good question. So as a student, I think try to get as much experience as possible. If you can, try to get an experience in a startup first to understand what it is, this mindset, because mindset is what will carry you along for the next 50 years. So I think that's one. Second thing, I truly believe in domain expertise. So you need to like and to know something. Whether it's finance or whether it's biology or energy or whatever it is, but you need to have some kind of domain expertise. So if you don't know what you like, then again try a lot of experiences to learn and to start going much deeper. And at the same time, the good news is that AI is really accessible today. Wasn't the case 5 years ago. 5 years ago, you had to be in a large organization, a lot of resources, etc. Now everybody can use it. So you can, as a user, you can start using it. If you're slightly more analytical, what I would suggest is go deeper than that. So don't be just as a user, but try to understand what's behind, because that will give you an edge. Perhaps, yeah, I'll take a last question. Yeah.
Everybody else in the world is using the Dali, so it becomes a similar kind of a factory-produced, mass-produced model equivalent, versus that we use. Is there a view on that?
Yeah, so when you talk to senior leaders today, there's really, I would say, almost two different approaches. There's the first approach, especially in financial services, which is you're not going to see generative AI being used today. Why? Because there's all those questions in terms of regulations, compliance, black box, etc. So there's a huge, let's call that trend towards understanding. But the big difference between when I was talking at 2018 and today is that those discussions are not at the level of the management team, they're at the level of the board. That the level which is much higher, which is what do we want to do, what kind of strategy do we want to do. So this is the first part. The other part, which is it's a productivity play. It's what I call the unbundling, which is a productivity play. I currently have 100,000 people. Can I do the same with 50,000 people, 70,000 people? What kind of task? And here people are really looking in terms of whole activities and task. So there's a lot of work which is being done also on that side. There's a huge gap, and that goes back to the question that we had before in terms of more broader social impact. There's a huge gap, especially in the Western world, which is what's the impact on your employees, on your people. And at the moment, I think that's a big part missing. So if you're working on this, make sure that you don't forget about this part, because some people might not have a job, basically. So what do you do? Great. So I think we're reaching the end of our panel. So I'll just finish. If there was one thing, embrace change. Definitely, it's happening. It can be extremely exciting. And I would say, take it that way. It can be extremely exciting when a period of change, where those who are part of the change can see huge opportunities. So just make sure, to be part of this change. 3 different frameworks, for you to think of. And don't hesitate to find more research. We have a lot of research in that space. Or send me a message on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to answer any of those questions. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.